Shortly after nightfall, the warning sirens began to sound across central Israel. Within seconds, mobile phones vibrated with emergency alerts. Traffic stopped. Lights switched off in apartment towers across Tel Aviv. People moved quickly toward reinforced rooms and underground shelters. Above the city, the sky began to flash. Interceptors were already climbing. Radar systems across Israel had detected large numbers of missiles rising from launch sites hundreds of kilometers away. Within moments, the country's layered missile defense network shifted into full operational mode. Command centers began calculating trajectories. Tracking systems plotted incoming paths. Interceptor batteries received firing instructions. The attack had begun. Early reports indicated that Iran had launched a large-scale missile barrage aimed at Israel's central region, including Tel Aviv, one of the country's most densely populated urban areas. The number of projectiles appeared unusually high. Military analysts quickly recognized the pattern. This was not a symbolic strike. It was a saturation attempt. A saturation attack works by overwhelming defensive systems through volume. Instead of launching a few missiles that can easily be intercepted, the attacker launches many at once. Some may be ballistic missiles traveling at extremely high speeds. Others may be cruise missiles or drones designed to approach at lower altitudes. Each incoming object forces the defense network to react, track, and fire an interceptor. When dozens or hundreds arrive at the same time, the defensive system is forced into a difficult calculation. Which threats must be intercepted first? Which can be allowed to fall into open areas? And how quickly can interceptor batteries reload? Across Tel Aviv, residents could see bright streaks crossing the sky. These flashes were not the incoming missiles themselves. They were defensive interceptors launched from multiple batteries, positioned around the country. The interceptions occur high above the ground whenever possible. Destroying a missile in the upper atmosphere reduces the risk of debris reaching populated areas below. Some intercepts create large bursts of light visible from many kilometers away. Others produce smaller flashes as warheads are destroyed in midair. Emergency services began receiving calls almost immediately. Some reported falling debris. Others described loud explosions overhead. Emergency response teams moved through the city, checking impact sites and searching for damage. At the same time, Israel's Defense Command continued tracking incoming threats. Missile defense operators were not responding to a single projectile. They were managing a stream of incoming objects appearing across radar screens in rapid succession. Every incoming trajectory had to be analyzed. If a missile was projected to land in an open field or the sea, the system might ignore it. Interceptors are expensive, and they are limited in number. If a missile is predicted to strike a populated area, an interceptor must be launched quickly. This decision cycle happens in seconds. The scale of the attack quickly raised new questions among military observers. Launching hundreds of missiles requires significant planning. It also requires a large missile inventory and a coordinated launch structure capable of firing multiple waves in a short period of time. Such an operation is not spontaneous. It reflects a deliberate strategic calculation. The question facing Israeli defense planners that night was not only whether the missiles could be intercepted. The deeper question was how long such an attack could continue before the defensive system itself began to feel the pressure. When the first missiles appeared on radar, the defensive response did not come from a single system. Israel does not rely on one interceptor network. It operates a layered architecture designed to engage different types of threats at different altitudes and distances. Each layer addresses a specific class of incoming weapon. The purpose of this structure is simple. If one layer fails, another remains available. The outermost defensive layer is designed for long-range ballistic missiles. These are weapons that travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers, rising high above the atmosphere before descending toward their targets at extremely high speed. To intercept this type of threat, Israel operates the Arrow missile defense system. Arrow interceptors are designed to destroy ballistic missiles during the upper portion of their flight path. In some cases, the interception can occur outside the atmosphere. This approach attempts to destroy the warhead before it re-enters the denser layers of the atmosphere, where debris could cause additional damage. Intercepting a ballistic missile at that altitude is technically demanding. the Interceptor must reach extremely high speeds and calculate a precise collision course with the incoming target. Guidance systems rely on radar tracking and onboard sensors that continuously update the interception path. If a ballistic missile passes through this outer layer, the next defensive layer becomes active. This layer is handled by David's sling. David's sling was designed to intercept medium-range missiles and heavy rockets that travel shorter distances but still carry significant payloads. These weapons do not always follow the same high ballistic trajectory as long-range missiles. Some approach on flatter paths, making interception more complex. David's sling interceptors use advanced radar guidance and maneuvering capabilities to engage these targets before they reach populated areas. The final defensive layer is the system most widely recognized: Iron Dome. Iron Dome is designed for short-range rockets and artillery projectiles. These weapons are often launched in large numbers, from relatively close distances. Iron Dome batteries use radar to detect the launch of a rocket and immediately calculate where that rocket will land. If the trajectory indicates the rocket will strike an unpopulated area, the system may not intercept it. If the rocket is projected to hit a city, an interceptor missile is launched. The interceptor detonates near the incoming rocket, destroying or destabilizing the warhead in mid-air. Iron Dome has proven highly effective against smaller rockets. Yet the system was never designed to operate in isolation against large ballistic missile attacks. That is why the layered structure exists. Each defensive layer provides additional time and additional opportunities to stop incoming threats. Yet this architecture faces a mathematical constraint. Every interceptor launched removes one interceptor from available stock. The missiles fired by an attacker are often far cheaper than the interceptors used to destroy them. A ballistic missile may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. A high-performance interceptor can cost several $1,000,000. This imbalance creates a strategic challenge. An attacker may attempt to launch large numbers of missiles at once in order to exhaust defensive inventories. Even if most of the incoming missiles are intercepted, the defending side must continue firing interceptors to maintain protection. If the attack continues long enough, stockpiles begin to shrink. For this reason, missile defense is not only about technology, it is also about logistics, manufacturing capacity, and the ability to replace interceptors during extended conflict. When large missile barrages occur, the defensive network becomes a test of both engineering and supply. The missile barrage aimed at Tel Aviv represents more than a single night of conflict. It reveals the structure of Iran's broader military strategy. Iran does not operate a large modern air force capable of sustained operations against a heavily defended opponent. Decades of sanctions have limited access to advanced aircraft and spare parts. As a result, Iran built an alternative form of long-range strike capability. That alternative is ballistic missiles. Missiles require no pilots and no air superiority. They can be launched from concealed locations, mobile launch vehicles, or underground facilities. Once fired, they travel along predetermined trajectories at extremely high speed. This allows Iran to threaten targets across the region without needing to control the airspace between launch point and destination. Over the past 2 decades, Iran has invested heavily in missile production. Different missile classes were developed for different ranges and payloads. Some are designed for regional targets within a few hundred kilometers. Others can travel much farther, reaching major population centers and military bases across the Middle East. For Iran's military planners, these missiles serve several strategic functions. First, they provide a form of long-distance retaliation. If Iran itself comes under attack, missile forces allow it to respond quickly against cities, infrastructure, or military bases belonging to its opponent. Second, missiles function as a deterrent tool. The knowledge that a large missile inventory exists forces potential adversaries to consider the cost of escalation. Any major strike against Iranian territory could trigger missile retaliation across a wide geographic area. Third, missile forces compensate for limitations in other branches of the military. When a country cannot rely on advanced aircraft or large naval fleets, long-range missiles offer an alternative means of projecting power. The attack on Tel Aviv fits within this strategic framework. Launching hundreds of missiles serves several possible objectives. One objective is to test the defensive systems protecting Israeli cities. By observing which missiles are intercepted and which are not, analysts can gather information about interception patterns, radar coverage, and response times. Another objective is psychological pressure. Large missile barrages generate uncertainty among civilian populations. Even if most missiles are intercepted, the constant activation of air raid sirens and emergency alerts disrupts daily life. This form of pressure can affect economic activity and public confidence during extended conflict. There is also a military calculation tied to missile inventories. Missile defense systems rely on interceptor stockpiles that must be manufactured and replaced. If an attacker can force the defender to expend large numbers of interceptors, the balance between offense and defense begins to shift. Each incoming missile forces the defender to make a decision: intercept now, or conserve interceptors for later threats. This dynamic is why large missile barrages are often launched in waves rather than single strikes. The goal is not only to cause damage, the goal is to stretch the defensive system across time. From a strategic perspective, the barrage becomes a test of Israel's defensive technology, a test of interceptor supply chains, and a test of how modern cities function under the constant possibility of long-range missile attack. For military planners across the world, these events offer a clear demonstration of how missile warfare is reshaping regional conflict. Nations that possess large missile inventories can challenge technologically advanced defenses without needing traditional air superiority. The outcome of such confrontations does not depend only on the accuracy of missiles or the effectiveness of interceptors. It depends on endurance. Which side can sustain the exchange longer? Which side can continue producing weapons faster? And which defensive systems can operate under repeated waves of incoming threats?